Neither the Oreshnik missile nor the loud shrieks from the Kremlin helped Vladimir Putin. The United States Coast Guard has seized another Russian tanker from Olin's Shadow Fleet, which was trying to evade the Americans from Venezuela. This happened today, January 9th. Moreover, it is reported that the Americans are currently pursuing 4 more tankers that may be connected to Moscow. Russia stays silent. Meanwhile, Donald Trump surprised Russians the day before with a confession. The United States president stated that the Russian Navy's submarine and destroyer, which the Kremlin allegedly sent to protect the already seized tanker, Bella 1 simply fled as soon as the United States Coast Guard began seizing the tanker. Now the Kremlin is shouting that it wasn't even their tanker, and that there were actually Ukrainians on board. They say there's no need to associate them with this vessel. At the same time, Trump is scheduled to meet today with the heads of oil companies as part of efforts to persuade the largest American energy companies to return to doing business in Venezuela. In addition, Trump announced the cancellation of the second wave of attacks on Venezuela, citing Venezuela's cooperation with the United States of America, a week after the overthrow of dictator Nicolas Maduro. The Venezuelan government yesterday announced the release of a significant number of political prisoners, which is a key demand of Washington. As a result, Russia has completely lost its influence in this region, which is why the bold dictator Putin is furious. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave any comment under this video. This really helps a lot in promoting the content on YouTube, and I would be very grateful to you for that. In addition, subscribe to my Telegram channel Peachy News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, early Friday morning, the United States Southern Command reported the capture of another oil tanker in the Caribbean Sea. Here is the quote. United States troops, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, landed from the aircraft carrier United States S. Gerald Ford and detained the motor tanker ship Olina in the Caribbean Sea without incident. According to marine traffic, the tanker Olina was sailing near Venezuela under the flag of East Timor. But it has already been stated that this vessel also belonged to the Shadow Fleet of the Russian Federation and served the interests of Russia and Iran. It is important to note that this happened after the United States seized 2 tankers linked to Venezuela and Russia earlier this week, including a vessel directly under the Russian flag in the Atlantic Ocean and another tanker in the Caribbean Sea. Earlier this week, the White House said that Donald Trump is not afraid to continue seizing sanctioned oil tankers, despite concerns that this could increase tensions with Russia and China. Trump says, Russia? Yeah, I don't care about it. And here I'll quote Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. Trump will pursue policies that best serve the interests of the United States of America. This means enforcing the embargo on all Shadow Fleet ships that are moonlighting as oil carriers. By the way, new details have emerged about the previously seized Russian tanker Bella 1, or as the Russians later called it, Mariner. Today, the press alcoholic of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mashka Zakharova, probably sobered up and made a statement, quote, in response to our appeal. United States President Donald Trump has decided to release 2 Russian citizens from the crew of the Mariner tanker, which was previously detained by the American side during an operation in the North Atlantic. We welcome this decision and express our gratitude to the leadership of the United States of America. Do you hear that? The Russians are suddenly grateful to the United States leadership? And let me remind you that these same Russians just a couple of days ago, even before their tanker was seized, were saying how they would strike the Americans hard. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation stated that the accusations from the United States leadership about the tanker sailing under a false flag are unfounded, since on December 24, 2025, the tanker legally received a temporary permit to sail under the Russian state flag. And then the funny Russians made a menacing statement, quote, Russia not only did not give consent for the pursuit of this vessel, which lasted several weeks, but also issued an official protest. The seizure of the tanker is a gross violation of the fundamental principles and norms of international maritime law, as well as the freedom of navigation, and a significant infringement on the lawful rights and interests of the shipowner. At the same time, the insinuations made by certain United States officials suggesting that the appropriation of the Mariner is supposedly part of a broader strategy for Washington to establish unlimited control over Venezuela's natural resources appear cynical. We categorically reject such neo-colonial ambitions. That was a few days ago, and today Mashka Zakharova is very grateful to the United States leadership in America for the release of the two Russians. But after a few days, the Russians say, listen, that's not even our ship, the Mariner. What Mariner? That's not ours. And one more important point. And the Russians came up with a story that the military ships and the submarine of the Russian fleet, which Putin sent to guard the Mariner tanker, simply didn't make it in time. That's why the Americans quickly seized the tanker and ran away, and now the Russians are already claiming that if the Russian submarine had arrived on time, then the Americans would have been in trouble. But today, Donald Trump says that when the operation to seize the Mariner tanker began, the Russian submarine and destroyer, seeing this, quickly ran away. Quote, the fact is that the Russian ships, the submarine and the destroyer both disappeared very quickly. When we arrived at the scene, we took control of the ship, and now they are unloading the oil.
The fact is, the Russian ships, the submarine and the destroyer, both disappeared quickly when we arrived, quote, and we raised the ship. And the oil is right there. And yes.
One more thing, indeed, the Ukrainian embassy confirmed that there were Ukrainians among the crew of the tanker Bella 1, and now the Ukrainian authorities are seeking their release. But this was just the beginning of the story. It has already been officially stated in Washington that tankers fleeing from Venezuela and the Shadow Fleet are actively trying to hide from United States warships by changing their flag to Russian. However, this does not help the ship that tried to take shelter in Murmansk, which the Americans boarded. I mean the very same Mariner. As satellite images show right now, a United States Navy destroyer. The United States is pursuing 4 oil tankers that left Venezuelan waters earlier this week and are now hurrying across the Atlantic, heading toward Africa and Europe. These tankers are part of a group of 16 vessels that apparently made a coordinated attempt to break through the maritime blockade of Venezuela, leaving its ports at the same time in different directions. So far, the United States has only managed to stop one of these tankers. On Wednesday in the Caribbean Sea, American military forces boarded the tanker Sophia. One of the tankers, which was called Veronica, changed its name to Galileo this week and switched its flag to Russian, clearly trying to avoid being detained by the United States Navy. 3 other tankers carrying Venezuelan oil did the same thing. They are under United States sanctions for transporting oil from Russia and Iran. And then both vessels were unexpectedly registered in Sochi and Taganrog, but the Kremlin's plan failed. However, changing the flag to Russian did not help the tanker Bella 1, which tried to leave Venezuela more than 2 weeks ago. At first, it managed to prevent United States Coast Guard soldiers from boarding, but after a long chase, it was eventually boarded in the waters between Iceland and Scotland. Trump has shown he doesn't care that the Russians are trying to save these tankers, and now the Russians are abandoning them, claiming they're not theirs. But in the meantime, Trump announced that he has established a dialogue with the new Venezuelan government, and therefore will not launch new strikes against that country. On Friday, a United States State Department delegation visited Caracas for the first time since Nicolas Maduro's overthrow, indicating official negotiations are now underway there. Well, the Venezuelan authorities have indeed reported a preliminary agreement on cooperation with the Americans. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you found this episode interesting and useful, you can support the work of this YouTube channel with your donation or subscription using the links and details in the description of this video or by using the QR code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.